Hello, Truth Seekers, good people. Welcome back. Zach here. I want to talk about the Brian Williams scandal or whatever they're calling it in the media. Again, this is another non story that the media is making a big story, what they do all the time. A lot of people have not realized that the major weapon used against all of us is information. Information is a weapon when you're overloaded with nonsensical information you do not need. And this Brian Williams story is one more piece of nonsense. And to get to that, let's just go back and watch the original report that started this controversy. We'll watch that and then we'll talk about it. This is from 2003, 4 days after the war began.
Our colleague Brian Williams is back in Kuwait City tonight after a close call in the skies over Iraq. Brian, tell us about what you got yourself into.
Well, in the end, Tom, it did give us a glimpse of the war being fought as few have seen it. We asked the U.S. Army to take us on an air mission with them. They accepted. We knew there was risk involved. We knew we would be flying over Iraq. We discussed it. We weren't cavalier about it. We took off, and that is right about when things started to happen.
What's the weapon status? Right now, it should still be locked and loaded on safe.
Indeed, just before we're able to make our drop, radio traffic makes clear this routine mission is running into trouble.
We took fire on the way in. We currently are not under fire. I say again, not under fire, but we look for some type of security. Over.
We quickly make our drop and then turn southwest. Suddenly, without knowing why, we learn we've been ordered to land in the desert. On the ground, we learned the Chinook ahead of us was almost blown out of the sky. That hole was made by a rocket-propelled grenade, or RPG, fired from the ground. It punched cleanly through the skin of the ship, but amazingly, it didn't detonate. Though the chopper pilots are too shaken to let us interview them, we learned they were shot at by some of those waving civilians.
See, are you hearing all the clues, Truth Seeker? The pilots are too shaken to give an interview. They just showed us a picture of metal with a hole punched through it, supposedly punched by an explosive RPG. All the elements of this story are already fake. They're already obvious lies and deception. Let's continue.
One of whom emerged from under a tarp on a pickup truck like this one and shot the grenade. We meet a unit from the 3rd Infantry, called in, as it turns out, to protect us from the enemy, which they say doesn't look like the enemy. A massive sandstorm grounds us for 2 nights. The infantrymen stand guard the whole time. This morning, the skies finally cleared, and we prepared to move out.
We'll kick and burn and get the heck out of here. Yeah, man. Have a safe trip back. Yeah.
We thank our protectors who prepare to push on toward Baghdad, and we head back to base. Our routine 6-hour mission had turned into 50 hours that were anything but. On this broadcast last week,
Okay, so that was his story from March 24th, 2003, as an embedded journalist. And long before this story, I did this post on my blog. I wrote it in August this 2014. I just talked about embedded journalism in the war, these most recent Gulf wars. It should be noted that the word embedded is a 33 word. Journalism is also a 42 word. And if you study the history of papers and print media, you'll see that it's always been the industrialists, the corporatists that have been behind the media and shaping the perspective of their audiences for consumption purposes. And this war has been nothing more than a consumer product. We've all been paying for it with our tax dollars and watching it vicariously through the television. And at the beginning of the war, it was people like Geraldo Rivera. I remember this. I mean, has anybody ever taken Geraldo Rivera seriously? This guy was over in Iraq giving the most bogus reports, telling us all these stories. This guy's full of it too, just like Brian Williams. They're all full of it. The whole news media is full of it. And in ousting Brian Williams, all they're trying to do is make it seem like they're legitimate, and they oust the liars, which is clearly not the truth. Let's watch Brian Williams' apology.
Last week, in an effort to honor and thank a veteran who protected me and so many others, After a ground fire incident in the desert during the Iraq War invasion, I made a mistake in recalling the events of 12 years ago. It did not take long to hear from some brave men and women in the air crews who were also in that desert. I want to apologize. I said I was traveling in an aircraft that was hit by RPG fire. I was instead in a following aircraft. We all landed after the ground fire incident and spent 2 harrowing nights in a sandstorm in the Iraq desert. This was a bungled attempt by me to thank one special veteran and, by extension, our brave military men and women, veterans everywhere, those who have served while I did not. I hope they know they have my greatest respect, and also now my apology.
So do you get it, Truth Seeker? This guy is having to apologize about misspeaking about a lie. And he's having to do this 12 years later. The original lie is from March 2003. We're now in the beginning of 2015. And all his lie is that he forgot which helicopter he was in the lie. So really, it's not even that big of a deal. Lying about a lie? Who cares? Who cares? This is a non-story. Do you know why they're doing this? They're doing this to mess with the gullible, idiotic American public. If you took a survey in this country and asked the majority of people what news anchor they like the most, they're going to say Brian Williams. I know this is a fact. Just living in this country, I've heard so many people, you don't even have to bring it up. They'll just talk about how much they like Brian Williams. This is the most likable face in U.S. media right now. Personally, I've never liked this guy. I think all these people are scumbags. I recognize the news is a bunch of liars. I hate the way they talk to us. Let's just go back and watch the beginning of this old clip back when it was Tom Brokaw. Let's go back and watch the beginning of that clip. I just want you to pay attention to how Tom Brokaw speaks in this voice, looking to the camera. I guess this dupes so many Americans when you speak in this voice in this way. But to me, just any time, imagine that somebody came into your home and spoke this way to you. Would you believe them? Let's listen to Tom Brokaw.
Our colleague Brian Williams is back in Kuwait City tonight after a close call in the skies over Iraq. Brian, tell us about what you got yourself into.
Brian, tell us about what you got yourself into. I mean, just you can just see through it. I guess some people don't have eyes to see, but sane people don't talk that way. People in the media, they always talk like with a poker face, a dishonest face, a manipulating face, like they're trying to hold something back. As for Brian Williams, there's a few other curiosities about this man right now. Let's see if I got his stats up here. Notice that he's born on May 5th, 5-5. He's also currently 55 years old now, a multiple of 11, an important number to these numerologists. He's also born in Connecticut, where all this media is hubbed out of, likely born into it. He's probably been it since he was a baby. And in addition to that, he's got these BW initials. B's the second letter, W's the 23rd. Put them next to each other, it's like 223. Just like the major British media network BBC. They're also 223. Of course, this is the flip of 322 around. The word synagogue, or I should say the name, Synagogue of Satan, sums to 223. And again, I don't think any of this is a coincidence. I think the reason this story about his supposed lie is coming out right now is because it's 12 years later, and also because his age is 55. I think that's part of the reason he has to go through this hoax right now. Brian Williams also has some interesting name gematria. His name was Simple English. Brian Williams sums to 142. That is a number of much significance. The word terrorist even sums to 142. So, again, major non-story here that they're turning into a big story. All the major news networks are running with it, covering the coverage of Brian Williams' lie as if it's something interesting, worthwhile, or surprising. It is none of those. And what it does is it's just, like I said, information is the real weapon. It's piled in our brains and it makes us forget about the real liars. Here's George W. Bush, March 18th, 2003. 6 days before the original Brian Williams lie. Here he is giving Saddam 48 hours to step down before we invade on March 20th. Let's just listen to some of these quick lies.
Because we are not dealing with peaceful men. Intelligence gathered by this and other governments leaves no doubt that the Iraqi regime continues to possess and conceal some of the most lethal weapons ever devised. This regime has already used weapons of mass destruction against Iraq's neighbors and against Iraq's people. The regime has a history of reckless aggression in the Middle East. It has a deep hatred of America and our friends, and it has aided, trained, and harbored terrorists, including operatives of Al-Qaeda.
True Seeker, we just need to cut it off right there. You know who hates America and all the people who live here? This guy and all the elites who rule us. They don't give a fuck about us. They don't care about us at all. Think about our entire lives. We have to go to schools where we're lied to every day. Once we're done grinding in school, we have to come work and pay taxes that keep these people rich and in power. And how do they stay there? By grinding us like slaves, making our minds ignorant from the beginning, poisoning us with toxic food, and then day after day just pelting us with more lies. Day after day after day. This man has never been held accountable for these lies he just told into the camera. And for those of you who were fooled for a long time and believed any of this, guess what? It's because you were asleep. The day this speech was given, websites such as BuzzFlash had all the information America needed. It was out from the day the speech was given that this entire speech was based on lies, that there were no weapons of mass destruction, that the reports were fudged. Data manipulations. Do you remember the Valerie Plame scandal and her husband? All that information was out the day he gave this speech. Lies. More than a decade old, no justice, but here we are 12 years later talking about Brian Williams' lie that was based on a lie. And that hasn't even been brought up in the story, that his original report was a lie. He's being blasted because he couldn't remember which helicopter he was in the lie. Let's go back and just watch all these lies and remember how hard we were bombarded with lies at the beginning of the Iraq War, which is where the Brian Williams story is coming from. And again, the reason we're getting the Brian Williams story is so that when we think of Iraq lies, we'll now think of him instead of the real liars, the more important liars.
It concludes that Iraq has chemical and biological weapons, that Saddam has continued to produce them, that he has existing and active military plans for the use of chemical and biological weapons, which could be activated within 45 minutes, including against his own Shia population.
The United States knows that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Any country on the face of the earth with an active intelligence program knows that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction.
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction. There is no doubt that he is...
For those of you who still don't know, the United States armed Iraq. We used Iraq to attack Iran in the 80s. And then we later used that excuse to invade them the first time. This is how the puppet show is maintained. This is how the ongoing manipulation occurs. And they know they can do it because they've purposefully made the population of this country stupid. That's always been the plan. That's why our schools are set up to teach to the least among us. That's why our food is made of toxic chemicals. It's why our news coverage is nothing but lies. It's an ongoing conditioning. It's an ongoing dumbing down. It's well orchestrated. And it fools way too many people.
amassing them to use against our friends, against our allies, and against us.
The choice is his. And if he does not disarm, the United States of America will lead a coalition
and disarm him in the name of peace. Saddam Hussein aids and protects terrorists, including members of Al-Qaeda. Secretly and without fingerprints, he could provide one of his hidden weapons to terrorists or help them develop their own. Before September the 11th, many in the world believed that Saddam Hussein could be contained. The war on terror, you can't distinguish between Al-Qaeda and Saddam when you talk about the war on terror. We've learned that Iraq has trained Al-Qaeda members in bomb making and poisons and deadly gases. He's a threat because he is dealing with Al-Qaeda. We know that Iraq and Al-Qaeda have had high-level contacts.
He has not developed any significant capability with respect to weapons of mass destruction. He is unable to project conventional power against his neighbors.
We are able to keep arms from him. His military forces have not been rebuilt.
It appears that there were not weapons of mass destruction there.
You said you knew where they were.
I did not. We know where they are. They're in the area around Tikrit and Baghdad and east, west, south, and north somewhat.
You said you knew where they were, near Tikrit, near Baghdad, and north, east, south, and west of there. Those are your words.
My words were, we know where they are. They're in the area around Tikrit and Baghdad and east, west, south, and north somewhat.
Senator's got his facts wrong. I have not suggested there's a connection between Iraq and 9/11.
With respect to 9/11, of course, you've had the story that's been public after. The Czechs alleged that Mohammed Atta, the lead attacker, met in Prague with a senior Iraqi intelligence official 5 months before the attack.
He said there were three main reasons for going to war in Iraq: weapons of mass destruction, the claim that Iraq was sponsoring terrorists who had attacked us on 9/11, and that Iraq had purchased nuclear materials from Niger. All three of those turned out to be false.
First, just if I might correct a misperception, I don't think we ever said, at least I know I didn't say, that there was a direct connection between September the 11th and Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein aids and protects terrorists, including members of Al-Qaeda.
You have said in the past that it was, quote, pretty well confirmed.
No, I never said that.
Okay. I
never
think
said
that is...
That's absolutely not. What I said was, it's been pretty well confirmed that he did go to Prague and he did meet with a senior official of the Iraqi intelligence.
So, Truth Seeker, if you're watching this and going, oh my goodness, these people really went back and forth, you know, it makes me sad, honestly, Truth Seeker, because I've been awake all this time, and I remember all this stuff like it was yesterday. And it's just sick. I mean, this last administration we had before Obama was just sick. It was the sickest thing on the planet. That's why to see all these Christians coming out of the woodwork and trying to see if Obama's Satan and saying, oh, he looks like the Antichrist. It's just a big joke to me, you guys. I mean, Obama's really bad. I've told everybody from the beginning to never vote for this guy. I've never supported him for a second. But this last administration, the Bush administration, was 1,000,000 times worse. 1,000,000 times worse. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe Obama's no better. But just they were so bad because it was like this. It was this stuff out in front of us every day. Blatant lies, hypocrisy, back and forth. And at the time, you know, that time was the same as this time, really. Let's continue.
Intelligence service.
Well, let me just ask you this. If they did not have these weapons of mass destruction, though, granted, all of that is true, why then did they pose an immediate threat to us, to this country?
You and a few other critics are the only people I've heard use the phrase immediate threat.
That he has existing and active military plans for the use of chemical and biological weapons, which could be activated within 45 minutes.
Active chemical munitions bunkers, mobile production facilities.
The United States knows that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction.
The reason I keep insisting that there was a relationship between Iraq and Saddam and Al-Qaeda, because there was a relationship between Iraq and Al-Qaeda.
What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing.
You know, what has been happening as we debate the number of troops, as we debate whether to withdraw, is also this continual debate over the intelligence leading up to the war. And I know you've said you believe that it's wrong to question the motives or the honesty of administration officials, but I have a different question for you. If you had known that no weapons of mass destruction would be found, would you have advocated invasion?
I didn't advocate invasion.
You didn't?
No, I wasn't asked. If you read all the books and the things.
You weren't, but why weren't you asked? That's very puzzling.
Well, I'm sure the president understood what my views were, but as a technical matter, did he ever look and say, well, what should we do? Should we go do this or not do that? This is something that the president thought through very carefully.
Are you trying to distance yourself from the war with that?
Of course not. I agreed completely with the decision to go to war. And said that 100 times. And don't even suggest that.
I'm just asking.
Yeah, well, you know better. Look, the interesting thing to me about the pre-war intelligence is clearly it was wrong.
Every statement I make today is backed up by sources, solid sources. These are not assertions.
So would you have been for an invasion if we had known that?
The answer is probably yes.
When it comes to who else knew the American public was being lied to about Iraq, one Democratic senator now says you can add.
I'm just going to cut it off here, Truth Seeker. The answer to who knew they were lying is anybody who was paying attention. And sadly, the other part of that answer is not enough people, because almost nobody's been paying attention. And that's the lesson I've been learning living in this country. Because all the time this has been going on, excuse me, I've been speaking out. I spoke out through all my college years. I've spoken out nonstop all this time. I wish I made YouTube videos back then. And it's just been disgusting, because what I found out by being someone who speaks out is that most people just don't care. They just want to watch TV, drink alcohol, have fun, watch movies, and not pay attention to any of this. And the problem with not paying attention to any of this is that we become willing participants in it. Because we need to recognize that each of us are contributors and supporters of these wars. Our consumption, our tax dollars, they are what keep all this alive, as well as our ignorance and our apathy. If we don't resist this, then it's going to continue to go on. So all of this is a product of our apathy. All of it. And again, Truth Seeker, the main point of this message is to not get caught up in all the hysteria they're trying to give you. You just need to keep a focused view of what is going on in this world and understand why you're given stories, such as that Brian Williams lied about Iraq. The whole story is a joke. It's not meant to out Brian Williams. There could be some political stuff, or it could just be a timing thing. It could be that Brian Williams is ready to move on. This story is just another hoax. Brian Williams' lie is super insignificant. The media didn't need to accentuate this and make a big story about it. It's just so funny how they're having people focus on the fact that he forgot which helicopter he was in. They're making it seem like that's the important part of the lie. Not that the entire story was a lie from the beginning, to accompany a war based on lies. You know? For the next 10 years, more people are probably going to remember that Brian Williams was the big liar in Iraq now. They'll forget about George W. Bush, Tony Blair, Donald Rumsfeld, and all the other liars. It's just, there must be something in our media, something behind the images, something behind the words that subconsciously registers in most people's brains. Because even the more I think about it, you know, back then when the media was covering Donald Rumsfeld lying, George W. Bush lying a little bit, you know, it never created the buzz. People never really wanted to talk about that. But for whatever reason, people want to talk about Brian Williams. Brian Williams lie, you know? People ask me if I've heard about this story. Who cares? Brian Williams? This guy doesn't even matter. Another smug news anchor. Oh, here's the latest Brian Williams lie. And it's just so obvious. Like, if I read this, I would think, exactly. See, here's a story that he's been telling on the news about how he got robbed back in the 70s when he used to sell Christmas trees. Another sensational story. The point where it's obvious that he's lying is that the fact that he can recall the make of the gun that was shoved in his face as he was being robbed. If anybody's ever had a gun pointed in their face, they don't remember exactly what the gun looked like. They remember that they had the gun in their face. Not that it was a 38 or a 22 or a 9. That's the way the media reports stuff. Brian Williams' story is that a guy pulled a 38 out and stuck it in his face. And he's getting questioned, and people are saying, well, how could he remember that it was a 38? Well, people need to start asking these questions about all the news stories, because the way Brian Williams is getting scrutinized right now is the way every news story should get scrutinized. He's lying the way he was trained to be a liar. The media are all paid, well-trained liars. It's a military psyop. I've done a video on this. It truly is a military psyop. In the Army Field Manual, it's Rule 33-1. That is the PSYOP program against the American public. This is real stuff. They know they need to brain control us because there's no other way we'd go along with any of their shit. So obvious. And they also need to pacify us and put us to sleep. And that's why they overload us with one bullshit story after another, including this Brian Williams scandal. All right, Truth Seeker, that's about it. Just don't forget who the real liars are, the ones who really need to be held accountable. All right, till next time.